Okay, it's been another week, and where are we at? I told you guys I was patching the firewall, so I kind of got that's pretty much Frankenstein back together. It's not the best, but it's not bad either. It'll work. What else? So I pulled the heads off the engine back here to start kind of cleaning those up a little bit and rebuilding them. I'm gonna have to go through and weld these towers closed because these are the DoD towers, the displacement on demand lifters. Anyways, when you do a regular build, you got to block these off because otherwise oil just, you lose a bunch of oil pressure. So that, and I'm waiting for my tool to come to pull this balancer off because I broke my 3-jaw yesterday. One of my favorite tools, that thing, that brushless DeWalt there, had the power to break this bolt loose. That's kind of cool. I wanted to test it on that to see. So that and the Milwaukee brushless ratchet there, those are two of my favorite tools in the shop. But never mind the fact that the shop's a complete disaster right now. But either way, so there's the T56 that's going in there. That's a regular F-body T56 from like a 99 Camaro. Before, I was running two versions ago, I was running a Power Glide, and the Power Glide and the T56 actually share the same spline output. So I saved this drive shaft because I went from a Power Glide to a T56 Magnum, and now I'm going back to a regular T56. So I was able to reuse this drive shaft. I have to redo the companion flange because now I've switched to an S13 subframe with the 350Z differential, as to where before I was on the Z31 subframe with the Z31 differential. But that allows me to reuse the drive shaft. I just got to switch the companion flange, and the length on the Power Glide and the T56 are actually pretty similar. So I may have to shift the engine either forward or back, like maybe a ½ inch, but it's that close that I can reuse it. So that's pretty good. What else? The radiator, I'm gonna try and do this in order. I'm trying to remember what to talk about, but the radiator, I like to run a dual pass radiator because it keeps the inlets and outlets on the same side. So coolant goes in, over, down, over, and then back out the same side. That's convenient for Z31s and LS motors when they're both on the same side of the engine. What else? Turbo. I got a VS Racing 80 millimeter. Alex with Z31 online, he helps me out with stuff. I think he's getting this guy going again sometime soon this year. So you can check him out for your parts if you want, because he can get a lot of stuff, even LS stuff he can kind of get. He got me this clutch that's a spec 1000, it's a stage 5. It's 1,000 horsepower or 1,000 foot-pounds is what it's rated for. But yeah, check him out, Z online or Z31 online. What else? What are we talking about? Let's talk about the heads. So heads are 243 heads because they come on the regular ls9 engine. 243s are what a lot of guys love to use. They're considered maybe a controversial topic, but the best of the cathedral port heads. Cathedral port means this intake is shaped like a cathedral roof there. The 243s are considered to be one of the best, and they come stock on the aluminum 5.3 engines. Actually, some of the other 5.3s I believe as well. But regardless, we tore these apart, kind of gave them a once over, pulled the old springs out and all that crap, and did the BTR. This is my spring kit here. It's a 630 lift spring kit, dual springs. I like my BTR stuff because they're good price and it's actually good quality. So I've never heard of BTR springs failing. I've heard of Pack springs failing and Patriot springs failing and whatever, but BTR actually does a pretty decent job. This kit comes with the spring seat, the valve seals, the dual springs, so it's got an inner and an outer spring in there. Comes with the retainer. These are just steel retainers, nothing super fancy, and it comes with the keepers. That whole kit for the entire upper end is $200. So to me, that's pretty good. BTR also does a thing where they do So everyone runs the ls9 head gaskets because it's a 7-layer multi-layer steel gasket. But the bore is 4.2 inches. If you're running a 5.3, the bore is much smaller than that. So running a bigger gasket is not ideal when you should be running something that matches your bore closely. BTR went and made a 7-layer gasket for a small bore engine, which is kind of cool. So you can see there the bore is 3.950 and 7-layer. And they're cheap too. They're like 50 bucks a piece, as opposed to all you Z31 guys, you got to pay out the nose for multi-layer steel gaskets, if you can even get them at certain times. Another thing BTR does is the trunnion upgrades. So that's the bearings inside of these rocker arms. They're known to fall apart on LS engines, so I always replace them. Like, I always do the trunnion upgrade. They do little C-clips on the outside with new bearings, and this new insert here pretty much makes it impossible to fall apart. Of course, I say that, watch mine fall apart now. But good upgrade to do. Another thing, BTR does push rods. A lot of you guys run factory push rods on some of this stuff, and it never even occurred to me to run a factory push rod because good push rods are so cheap. Like, you can get BTR push rods that are chromoly 080 wall thickness 5/16 push rods for like $100. So to run a factory push rod is just strange to me. These are nice push rods. These are actually Borowski Racing 7.4. 7.4 is kind of the standard length. You should always measure your push rod length, but a lot of the sloppy guys just kind of run a 7.4, and it is what it is. These are a double butted or a double taper, so it's thick in the middle. It's a 3/8 push rod instead of a 5/16. And these are actually like $300 push rods, but these are just left over from one of my previous builds. Camshaft, I'm gonna run an Elgin, I don't know how to say it, the 1840P. That's the sloppy stage 2 cam that a lot of people run. It's a performer. It does great for a medium power range, say around 3,500 to 7,000 RPM. It does really well, so that's what we're running. We've got some leftover ARPs from another Gen 4 LS motor that I was running, so we're going to put those back in. Injectors, I'm running the Bosch 210 injectors. They're cheap and they're good. A lot of guys they'll grab some 800cc injectors or some 1200s or whatever. My theory on injectors is go the biggest you can while still being able to control them at idle. If you can control them at idle, everything past that is fine. So the Bosch 210s, they're great. They flow a ton of fuel. In my opinion, it's hard to go too big on a fuel system. And I'd rather have it than not need it, and need it and not have it. Intake. This is the Typhoon intake, or the Pro Comp, or whatever you want to call it. It's the cheap cast intake, and it catches hate from some guys, but the thing is, if you look at research online, this intake actually flows pretty well. It flows as well or slightly better than an LS6 intake, which is a lot of people's favorite composite intake. This one was cheap. I think this is like 350 bucks. So the thing I don't like about it is that it comes with this plate right here that bolts onto the bottom. For boosted applications, I don't trust that. So I always drill and tap extra holes in between all of these. And then I silicone it and bolt it on, because that just seems like too much space in between bolt holes to me. Like, it could flex and leak. And I did that last time in the last one of these intakes I had, and it was great. This intake makes power between like 3,500 and 7,000 RPM, which is right where I'm trying to do it. It's got long runners, so the intake starts here, wraps all the way around, and goes down. That gives you a lower torque peak. Intakes like this one, the BTR intake, it has shorter runners, so you get higher peak horsepower with it. That's a performer between, say, 6,000 and 8,500 RPM. That's where I run this engine. I'm not going to run this engine to that. This one's probably going to have a peak RPM of maybe 7,500 RPM, if I even take it that high. So therefore, this intake is good for that. And this is actually a good intake for a lot of street LS motors. Like, it's just a good performer in that mid-range area. One of the things you got to do, because it's cheap, you got to get rid of this casting flash in here. So this little lip here, I mean, you don't have to, you can run it the way it is, but I will. I'm going to go through here with a die grinder and clean it up. And I've got mine for a 102 millimeter throttle body. So you can see the intake is for a 98 millimeter. So I got to bore it out, or port it a little bit, get rid of that little step there where it meets. And I think that's that. So that's where we're at right now. Man, 11-minute video. Wasn't supposed to be that long, but whatever. We'll revisit this again in a week and see where we're at.